Bien, pues muy buenas tardes, tengan todas y todos ustedes. Muchas gracias por continuar conectados. Los saludamos con muchísimo gusto, tanto a quienes están siguiéndonos en esta plataforma, como quienes nos están acompañando desde Facebook Live. Eh, Ambos espacios abiertos para el diálogo, para crear esta comunidad de conocimiento. Y yo quiero recordarles que estamos totalmente en vivo en estas dos plataformas, y que para esta sesión de la tarde tendremos dos interesantísimos paneles, como lo han sido los paneles anteriores. Uno, el que viene a continuación, sobre la contaminación del agua por estas actividades asociadas con las actividades mineras, y con la participación de Tania Mascarenhas Tavares, de la Universidad Federal de Bahía, en Brasil, y de César Arturo Irizaliturri Hernández, de la Universidad Autónoma de San Luis Potosí, con la moderación de la doctora Perla Alonso Eguía, Tecnóloga del Agua de la Subcoordinación de Hidrobiología del Instituto Mexicano de Tecnología del Agua. Y posteriormente, después de este panel, de esta mesa, tendremos una mesa sobre derechos humanos y agua. Está moderada por la doctora Carolina Escobar, integrante también del equipo de participación social del IMTA y la subcoordinadora de participación social en el IMTA. Y estarán participando en este panel María Fernanda Paz Salinas, del Centro Regional de Investigaciones Multidisciplinarias de la UNAM, el CRIM, y Sol Pérez Jiménez, consultora, y también por parte de la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México. Y al final, para el cierre, por ahí de las 17:45 de la tarde más o menos, estaremos cerrando con la conferencia magistral de cierre a cargo de Neil McIntyre, de la Universidad de Queensland en Australia. No se la pierdan, de verdad, una conferencia magnífica para acompañar este proceso de inversión que hemos tenido en esta jornada interesantísima sobre la relación entre el agua y la minería en nuestro país. Yo les recuerdo que, como hemos estado haciendo la dinámica, el chat está abierto para escucharnos, para leernos, para intercambiar opiniones, para opinar, para preguntar a nuestros ponentes, para interactuar también con nuestras moderadoras, y estamos totalmente listos para pasar a este siguiente panel. Sin más preámbulo, yo quisiera dejar el uso de la palabra y saludarle y desearle muy buena tarde a la doctora Perla Alonso, guía Liz, para hacer la moderación de este panel. Perla, ¿cómo estás? Me da muchísimo gusto.
Bien, Marco, igualmente, qué gusto esta audiencia que hemos tenido, qué gusto de nuestros panelistas, los que estuvieron, los que vienen. Me parece que ha sido un ejercicio maravilloso y no esperamos menos de lo que vamos a tener ahorita. Me da mucho gusto saber que están bien. Les deseo de entrada salud a todos, ¿no? Y qué bueno, aprovechemos esto que pareciera una situación difícil, que comunicarnos solamente de manera virtual nos permite también conectarnos de manera maravillosa con gente en todas partes del planeta. Así es que esto es una oportunidad para dialogar de manera diferente y muy coordinada como lo estamos haciendo. Muchas gracias, Marco.
Adelante, Perla.
Gracias. Pues damos la bienvenida al doctor César Irizaliturri y a la doctora Tania Mascarenhas Tavares. Es un gusto. Gracias por haber aceptado la invitación para estar hoy con nosotros en esta charla, en este diálogo que tenemos por el agua y la minería. Y bueno, sin más preámbulos, permítanme presentarles a nuestros participantes. Vamos a empezar con la doctora Tania. Me voy a permitir primero leerlo en español. La doctora Tania, tengo entendido, va a dar su presentación en inglés y voy a dar su presentación, su resumen curricular en español y trataré de darlo en inglés posteriormente. Bueno, la doctora Tania es catedrática titular del Instituto de Química de la Universidad Federal de Bahía, en Brasil. UFB por sus siglas, es maestra en ciencias por esta misma universidad y obtuvo su PhD, su doctorado, en la Universidad de Sao Paulo. Ambos títulos en química analítica. Posteriormente hizo un postdoctorado en química atmosférica de la Universidad Dortmund y el Instituto de Ciencias Analíticas en Alemania. Actualmente coordina el Laboratorio de Química Analítica Ambiental del Instituto de Química y el Núcleo Interdisciplinario del Ambiente, NIMA por sus siglos, de la Universidad de Bahía. Su producción científica cubre una amplia gama de aspectos de la calidad del medio ambiente, los ecosistemas marinos y la fotoquímica atmosférica de los efectos de la contaminación en las poblaciones humanas. integrando siempre aspectos interdisciplinares y centrándose en estudios de caso. En los últimos años se ha dedicado a la innovación tecnológica de bajo costo en el monitoreo del aire ambiental y el monitoreo del aire y la reducción de contaminantes químicos y microbiológicos en el aire y emisiones relacionadas con el cambio climático. Full professor with tenure of the Chemistry Institute of the Federal University of Bahía, Master in Science by UVA, the same university, and PhD by the University of Sao Paulo, both in analytical chemistry. Postdoctoral degree in atmospheric chemistry from the University of Dortmund and the Institute of Analytical Science in Germany. By now, coordinate the Laboratory of Environmental Analytical Chemistry and the Chemistry Institute and the Interdisciplinary Nucleus of the Environment. Scientific production covers a wide range of aspects of quality of the environment, marine ecosystem, and atmospheric photochemistry to the effect of pollution on human population. Always integrating interdisciplinary aspect and focus on case studies. In recent years, has been dedicated to low-cost technological innovation in environmental air monitoring and reduction of chemical and microbiological contaminants in air and emission related to climate change. So, Tania, welcome, and the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you. Let me see if I do this well to put my slideshow, okay?
Okay. Les pedimos a todos los que nos acompañen que puedan escribir igual sus mensajes, tanto en español como en inglés, se los haremos llegar de todas maneras a la doctora Mascarenhas.
No, okay. Okay.
Perfect.
Perfect. For those who are listening and seeing all these different things that I'm doing through my career, from photochemistry to health effects, I have to tell a little thing. I am an analytical chemist, and I started to do analysis of the environment of different compartments for case studies in the area where I live, which is Salvador, Bahia. And I found myself very powerful because I could get data that nobody else could. I could develop analytical techniques to make measurements that other people couldn't do. So I found it very powerful. And from that on, in the environment, I ended up getting involved in environmental chemistry, you know, all the behavior of the chemicals in the environment. And then I moved to policy also, because I knew I was ahead because I had more information than other people had, even the government. Okay, so I felt very powerful. And I got very involved with a lot in many case studies, and therefore also with all the three sectors of the society. That means government, the social organized organizations, civil organizations, the NGOs, and the technical people. So I enjoy very much the talks that I could hear and all this discussion, because that's the same discussions and the same complaints we have here in Brazil. So we have a lot in common with that. So having said that, I do thank you, the organizers and Perla in particular for this invitation. And actually, it's the first time I am showing this work here. I always get involved more with air, but this is what I'm going to talk today. It's connected. It's a little part of a bigger project where we had many medical doctors and well, some medical doctors and some people, some anthropologists, for a broader view of the whole problem. I am focusing only in water because that's what it was asked for, okay? But you have to see that this belongs to a much broader project and with very different views. The title of my talk was kind of broad. So I had to constrain it a little bit because it was effect on human health caused by mining. And I said by water from mining. And from this theme, water from mining, I want to mention three examples in general, just to illustrate the difference on effects that the mining can have. The first is the dam ruptures. All mining have dams. They have lagoons of contention. They have dams where they put out their releases. And we have recently in Brazil, and I mention it because it's very recent and it was all over the world in papers, the Mariana, which is in the state of Minas Gerais, Brazil, in 2016, where a dam was disrupted, broke, and invaded the river. It was, all the water was going to the Doce River. Doce has the same meaning as in Spanish. And there were 19 deaths in this event. And the contamination, this river, which is in the center of Brazil, ends up at the coastline, at the sea coastline. And so even in the sea coastline, we could get contamination in the coastline and affecting a huge park, reserve of that we have of coral reefs, very important coral reef reserve. So shows that we didn't have so much contamination in the Doce River per se, in the, let's say in the river, because it goes like a plug, like when you have in a sink, you wash your hands in the sink, the water flushes. So you get this flush of heavy metals, but in the sea, when they meet in the sea, they start to be precipitated, whatever is dissolved, and you have all of this contamination really affecting much more the sea coastline. And we found that in Mariana. So this is one example of them ruptures in contamination of water. And the other one was Brumadinho, also in Minas Gerais, the same state. And this was in January of last year, January 2019. And in this case was awful because the dam, if the dam broke, it would, the water, all the water would go to areas where people would meet, including the restaurant of the mine. And that's what happened. So the dam broke and there were two people, they were having lunch and there was death of 270 people right on the spot on that moment. And 11 people more are not found yet. So probably it will be 281. So these are the different examples of effect of water from mining. It's a physical, and a little bit in the first case of Mariana, it was chemical in a long distance, and Brumadinho in a short distance with immediate death. And that was physical happening. Now, you have the other type of effect that you have from mining is contamination of water, normally river water, because the mines most of the time are around river water. And if this water is used for irrigation, for drinking water, this can cause many problems. And the worst problem that I have heard, or that is in the literature, is the contamination, the Itaitai disease in Toyama, Japan. I couldn't give a talk today without mentioning this event, in which since 1912 until today, there is release of a metal mine, a cadmium, actually is cadmium. And all the toxicity of cadmium that in the standards that we use now for cadmium, either in water or in food, whatever, comes from the horrible situation that was Itaitai disease. I'm not going to discuss that, but I didn't want to go by in a talk like today and not mention this situation. There were 187 patients in the period of 40 years, more or less. 54 were recognized in 1980, and there are 380 some more being discussed by the authorities, because what you have to pay to the family is very high. And so the effects are kidney dysfunction, but the worst is the softening of the bones. Cadmium can soften the bones, especially on people that have low vitamin D. And before this was discovered, it took a long time, and I'm shedding. Okay. Women died in very painful situations where the bones were just broken. Okay. It was real. And Itaitai is the same, it's the interjection that means pain. In Portuguese, we say ai. If something hurts you, you say ai. But in Japanese, you would say itai. And so it's the disease of Itaitai. Okay. Having said that, I go to now what is the state case study that I happen to be looking at the quality of waters. And this has some peculiarities also in the political sense and the social sense. The water, we have here the state of Bahia, which is my state, okay? My state here. And in this state, in the Southwest, there is this municipality called Caetité. And Caetité has uranium. And Brazil wanted to go into nuclear power. Publicly, they would state that was for only Pacific reasons. We doubt a little bit. I think there was also a desire for nuclear weapons. The fact is that we have signed the agreement only for Pacific reasons, and Caetité has a lot of uranium. And this is not the only place in Brazil that has uranium, okay? This is about 700 kilometers from Salvador, here where I am right now. And it's the capital of Brazil and has about 3 million people. It's a big city. And it's the first capital of Brazil, so has very historical importance and real estate. So the name of the mine or the firm or the enterprise who owns the mine is Brazil. and it's the INB, Indústrias Nucleares do Brasil. It's the acronym. And this is a aerial view, and you see that it's not very, you don't have too many people, but it's a big it's a big enterprise here. See, all the mining goes on here, and this has been expired already. They are going to move now to another site where there is now a better concentration. I still want to mention something about ENB. This belongs to Brazil, to the Brazilian government. It's connected to the mine and energy department, State Department. And all the actions that we have in this country in nuclear power is ruled by the government, and it's considered national security. And if I have time enough, I will explain how does this affect our technical work. So here's again just another view of the industry, and here we have this area. Although in the area view you see a lot of green, actually this green, it's not so stable. This was taken when it was after rainy season, because actually it's a very dry area. It's a semi-arid zone. And in 2013, there was a drought in Caetité, and that's a picture from the drought. So you see that water is very scarce in this area. And people that live in rural areas, they hardly have any water. And for years and years, they suffer from water, and they would drink very muddy water, even without any filtration or any treatment. And water was so scarce that they were totally limited in food, in progressing without water. Now, when this mine started its activity in this area, they did dig several deep wells to provide water, drinking water for this population. So that was the gain they had, and it was a very important gain, I must say. So when you ask them, how can you drink this horrible water? They say, that's the only water we have. So we have to drink it, otherwise we will die. I also use it for beans, for garlic crops, and give it to the dairy cattle. INB mine collects water from here every 60 days, but it doesn't allow us to access the analysis results. This was the statement of a person that lives there for all his life, and to our medical doctors who were doing a cancer study in this area simultaneously. It was all one project, okay? Good. So what's the history of the nuclear industries in Brazil? Very briefly, so you have an idea. It's a state monopoly. All activities are considered national security. And we have 2 nuclear power plants, both in Rio de Janeiro, south of Bahia. Angra 1 and Angra 2. So together, they can provide energy for 3 million inhabitants. So that's the importance of these nuclear power plants. And in Caetité, the history was that in 1970, it was discovered uranium deposit. Caetité had then 5 years ago, 47,000. Now it has more than 50,000 people. And Lagoa Real, which is another municipality in the vicinity, with 3,934 inhabitants. And the reserve of this, it's only one reserve. It's 99.1 thousand cubic meter tons. Now, this amount is sufficient to maintain present power plants, our present power plants, in operation for 100 years. So it's very important. Whether you can complain about whatever you want, but this is an important issue, and it's an important exploitation. There are several NGOs fighting against that. They want to close the mine, but actually it's very difficult to find arguments to face this reality of this reserve, which is enough for 100 years. So in 1996, during this time, 26 years, they were getting organized, and they started the uranium deposit exploitation. And by 2000, the year 2000, they started to process also the uranium. They produce here the yellow cake, which is also very polluting, very dangerous. And it's the only uranium mine in operation in Brazil. So this is the importance. You have to face the importance. This is the road. We are going now to make a quick visit to this mine. And this is the road. Notice that the road is not paved. So all the cars that go by raise dust, and this is spread all over. They do have a lot of wind. By the way, it's very near here. They have the largest windmill farm to produce energy by wind in Brazil. So very near this. So it's funny because you have within some 1,000 meters or a few kilometers, you have two initiatives dedicated to energy, to production of energy. Anyway, so this was never paved. If you look for a map, they don't even have signs. To drive here and find the communities where we worked, and I'm going to talk about that, it was very difficult. And it was even difficult to make a map of that. But somehow we went to communities. I'll talk about that. So here's the ore. It contains, it's uraninite in English, and contains about 0.3% of uranium. It seems very little, but the uranium mines are always, deposits are always like this, very low, and that's why you need so many procedures, concentration procedures and separation procedures to get to the uranium to feed a power plant. So here's another site. The mine, of course, leaves behind solid residues, and there are already 2 million tons of solid residues around in the area, spread in different places. Of course, the actions of the performance of the mine require that explosions are done. It's a surface mine, and so you also the exposure produces dust, and thus radioactivity. The radioactivity is in particles, and also altogether in the gaseous phase, of also in the gaseous phase, in the form of radon. So this is the process for those, if there are engineers that are interested in that, what goes on they get the mineral. They leach to extract the uranium. They have a liquor, and then they take to the improvement plant, the mill. This liquor is clarified and filtered, and it forms the yellow cake. And this yellow cake actually is after several transformations, ammonium I only say this in Portuguese, but the form is U3O4 or 8. That's used to produce the energy in a nuclear plant reactor. Now, when you produce the yellow cake, this yellow cake has to travel. And it's not only to Rio for the Angra 1 and Angra 2. Actually, before it gets to Rio, it goes to Canada for gas transformation, and then from Canada to Netherlands for fuel transformation. There are some records that say that also to France to be concentrated. And then it comes back to Brazil, goes to Resende, which is in Rio de Janeiro, and from Resende goes to Angra 1 and 2. So there is a long traveling of this horrible product, okay? So here is a view in the industry of the solid residues, okay? Or solid wastes, and here also the liquid wastes, okay? And the solid waste, the people, the local people and the workers nicknamed it lung pile, because it goes to the lung and brings all the radioactivity to your lungs. Good, so where is the exposure? Well, all these activities and all activities, plus the mine, the cutting of the mine, the digging of the mine, favors the infiltration of uranium from the surface, whatever the residues, but also gives space for the oxygen to go in. So some of the other metals that were insoluble in the form of sulfide, they are oxidized and they become soluble. So this increases the mobility of in the pore, the water within the pore of the soils. And also, when it rains 2-3 months maximum, but it's a lot of rain. So that's all it drains everything, all the air deposits that have been in the surface, kept in the surface, they easily go to the underground water. That's why I bring all this explanation, because it gets to our water, okay? So you see here, this is taken from the industry premises, and here you see houses. They are all spread. They are not in a city. They are all spread around the area. And all these houses, they get air, and they drink from the well water. So here is one house. You see they're very poor houses. These people are very poor. And here you see the mine dump area. So this represents exposure for this population, okay? So plus the water, if it's contaminated, they get from the air. So what did we do? We decided to measure the metals and that come from the decomposition of uranium, measure uranium itself, and some other metals that are involved in the production, the procedure production of yellow cake within these premises. So aluminum and manganese, essentially, So what did we do? We selected 19 community people living around, spread around the mine. From these 19 wells that we selected, 3 of them were taken as reference because they would come from wells, either wells that the government uses to distribute water to some places that do not have their own wells, and or from wells that serve, for example, a hotel where we were staying, and we got the water from the hotel, and it's giving to the visitors. So 3 references, okay? You will see, I marked this on the table. And now, what's the framework that rule us? What can we, what tools do we have to say there is contamination, there is not contamination? Government, you don't have to worry. NGOs, you fight for your rights because there is contamination. It's the regulations, existing regulations. Thank goodness we have in Brazil, at least, we have 2 regulations. One comes from the health department, one comes from the, it's in a CONAMA. It's an advisory and deliberative body of environmental system of Brazil. And this has people, representatives from the government, representatives from the scientific community, representatives from the NGOs, and from also the enterprise. So it's a mixed group. So we have also USA, the quality standard for water for drinking water from USA, and we have the guidelines of the World Health Organization. It doesn't have the force of a law or a resolution or a regulation from the government, but it's the guideline, and we expect the governments to follow the guidelines. And actually, it fits quite well. You see, in the United States, aluminum, for example, they rule lower, they preach lower values than, for example, we do. We are more open for that. But chromium, we are, along with the World Health Organization, which is always the most tough, generally is the most tough. Then we go to manganese. Funny enough, manganese, the World Health Organization is less tough than us. We are tougher now. But it's primarily for the organoleptic drinking water standards, not exactly for health. For several reasons, we have that. So but we are tougher. Arsenic, we are on the same as everybody else is, except that we don't have a 0 target like EPA has, okay? Selenium, cadmium, we are okay, although the World Health Organization preaches to go lower. And selenium is not so, it's even good, selenium, but if it has a higher concentration, it can affect people. Lead, which we are supposed to, we should be tougher because lead is very, very toxic, especially for children. And EPA is less tough than we are, but it preaches that their target is 0 in the future, and we don't have this goal yet. And uranium, here we have 30 and 30, we have the same values as EPA has from the our health department. But CONAMA took less, half of it. So we are judging our results by CONAMA because the NGOs are after us. No, you have to go for what is in the resolution 396 of CONAMA. So, but the NGOs are right. because actually, if you look at the history of the development of these limits in EPA and in World Health Organization, they were previously, the value was 15 micrograms per liter, but then there was so much pressure from, they don't state that, but you know that it was from the power plant industries. They kind of press that they, both EPA and World Health Organization would preach a higher value. So we are really now the only one to hold this tough, okay, 15 micrograms per liter. And then here are the results of our analysis. We did it by ICP-MS. We had international certified reference samples to make sure that our data is right, because we knew that this result would end up in several lawsuits. So we were very careful. Now, these places don't interest you, the names, we are not going to care about that in this presentation, but you see that 3 places are in green, and they are the reference deep wells, the ones that should not be contaminated. And indeed, look at uranium. None of these 3 have high uranium values, okay? They are clean for uranium. So we made a good choice there. And, but you see that even the some of these reference samples, there is one situation here, where is that? That here, that you have in the reference sample, you see a little bit of manganese. But manganese, it's not that bad, that toxic. Metal, you have a big manganese mine in Mexico, which I am acquainted with. And even what it's preached in Mexico about the toxicity, I am not sure it's all due to manganese. So not only me, some other people. So this is interesting. But if you look at uranium decomposes, it's active. So when it emits radioactivity, it changes to another element. And lead is one of them. So I thought, ooh, it's going to be a lot of lead there. No, only here in Boa Vista, we find some little lead. So the uranium decomposes, but somehow it takes a long time to decompose. Somehow it's not.
Tania, excuse me, we have just 3 minutes.
Okay, so I will go on. So
thank you.
The conclusions that I have to say is that 26.6% of the deep well present uranium concentration above the maximum value permitted. We use the word permitted, not allowed in Brazil. We have 26.6 that are in process of contamination by uranium. And you say, oh, how do you say process of contamination? How do you know? Well, we find between the value that's considered contaminant and 0, we take the average, the half of that. And if you see that there is an increase, this is a process of contamination. That's how we evaluate contamination. All levels of uranium of the reference deep wells are below the maximum value permitted for uranium. Several wells around the mine present aluminum and manganese. Both of them are in the process for making yellow cake. Are above the maximum value permitted, but it's nothing too high. So we don't have to, we shouldn't be so worried. I mean, there are much worse situations than that. But the fact is that the studies done within this project by the medical school show that mortality rates and incidence rate of different types of cancer were higher than in other places of Bahia state, or even in Brazil, where uranium is not present. So there are other sources, which is not only the water, which is predominant, most probably, which comes from the air, exposure by the air. And that's where most probably the most responsible for these cancers. And so we should be very careful with the water, because you have to remember that the exposure of water will add up to the exposure of the air, and the air is really contaminated and damaging the people, causing cancer to people. So the coordinators, it's a scientific team. These are two medical doctors. This is the one that did the cancer. This is me, did the water. This is the anthropologist, and this he did random measurements in the air. So the financial support was commissioned by the government agency for law enforcement for labor in the state of Bahia. In good Spanish, Ministério Público. That was the Ministério Público who paid for the commission, asked us to do. We were free to do whatever we wanted, but he wanted some studies. And I thank you for your attention. Gracias por tu atención y obrigada por su atenção. Until next time. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, doctora Mascarenhas Tavares. Debido a que hay algunas preguntas muy interesantes, pero debido a que tenemos el tiempo un poquito recortado, vamos a juntar las preguntas para cuando el doctor César Ilizaliturri pueda terminar. Hacemos una serie de preguntas. Usted en el chat puede ir checando algunas de las preguntas que se han elaborado para usted.